At first, it felt like a favor. Professor Henry Collins had never been the kind of man who rushed through anything. His lectures were deliberate, measured, almost ritualistic. Every sentence carefully placed, every pause intentional. Students knew exactly how long his classes lasted because they always ended the same way on time, without exception. So when he dismissed class 10 minutes early one afternoon, a few students smiled. It happened again the following week, and the week after that. Soon, it became predictable. Henry Collins would glance at the clock, his voice would trail off mid-thought, and he would close his notebook as if a silent alarm had gone off in his head. "That's all for today," he'd say. What followed was always the same. He didn't stay to chat, didn't answer questions, didn't collect papers or linger near the podium. He packed up quickly, his movements tight and efficient, and left through the side door, never the main hallway. Some students joked that he had a secret appointment. Others assumed it was stress. A few appreciated the extra time and never thought twice about it. But one thing became impossible to ignore. In those final minutes, Professor Collins wasn't relaxed. He was watching the door. His eyes flicked toward the hallway every time footsteps echoed outside the classroom. His jaw tightened when voices grew louder. And when the clock hit a specific time, always the same time, something in him changed. He wasn't ending class early because he wanted to. He was ending it early because staying meant risk. And the reason for that risk wasn't inside the classroom. It was waiting outside. Henry Collins built his career on trust. He taught behavioral ethics, the psychology of right and wrong, power and accountability. His lectures explored how authority shapes behavior, how people justify crossing lines they swore they never would. Students described his classes as unsettling in a thoughtful way. He asked uncomfortable questions, forced reflection, but he always framed it academically, never personally. Henry was careful. Outside the classroom, his life was unremarkable, mid-40s, divorced, no children, a modest home a few miles from campus. He attended faculty meetings, submitted grades on time, and avoided gossip. There had never been a complaint filed against him, not officially. And that mattered, because universities don't respond to instincts. They respond to paperwork. So when Henry began changing his routine, there was no mechanism to question it. No policy about ending class early, no rule against avoiding hallways or cancelling office hours to the institution. Nothing was wrong. But to Henry Collins, everything was right. Because years earlier, long before the shortened classes, before the silence, before the fear, Henry had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And the only thing keeping that line buried was time. Time, however, has a way of circling back. The moment Henry Collins lost control didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly. Years earlier, when he was still considered a rising star in the department, Henry had taken on a mentorship role with a graduate student named Claire. She was bright, ambitious, eager to impress. He told himself he was helping her, guiding her. At first, it stayed professional. Then came longer meetings, closed doors, conversations that drifted from coursework to personal struggles. Henry framed everything as support, as trust, and Claire trusted him. That trust was the doorway. What followed was never violent, never loud. That's how Henry justified it. He told himself there was no coercion, just blurred boundaries. Just two adults having conversations that went too far. But power doesn't need force to be abusive. And when Claire eventually pulled away, Henry didn't pursue her. He did something worse. He erased her. He wrote her off as unstable, difficult, emotionally fragile. When she struggled academically, he documented concerns. When she withdrew socially, he framed it as unreliability. By the time she left the program, the paper trail favored him. Claire never filed a complaint. She didn't think she'd be believed, and Henry learned something invaluable from that experience. Silence works. The emails began years later, short, neutral, carefully worded. I don't want an apology. I want accountability. You don't get to pretend it didn't happen. Henry recognized the writing immediately. Claire, she had resurfaced, not as a student, but as an adult with nothing left to lose. At first, Henry ignored the messages. He had tenure, reputation, distance. He told himself she was bluffing. Then the emails referenced specific dates, specific rooms, details only the two of them knew. That's when Henry began adjusting his schedule. Ending class early gave him a head start time to leave campus before evening events brought more people into the halls, time to avoid common areas, time to disappear. What no one knew was that Claire had begun attending public lectures on campus. Not his. Yet, Henry wasn't afraid of being accused. He was afraid of being seen. Claire didn't start by going to the university. She started by speaking quietly. At first, it was one former classmate, then another. Casual conversations that began with hesitation and ended in long silences. She didn't accuse Henry Collins outright. She asked questions, described moments, waited to see reactions. And the reactions were never neutral. There was always a pause, a tightening of the jaw, a subtle shift in posture, then a sentence that sounded eerily familiar. He did that with me too. Claire wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, 3 former students came forward privately. Different years, different circumstances. Same patterns. Extended mentorships. Emotional dependency framed as academic support. Private meetings that crossed invisible but unmistakable lines. None of them had filed complaints at the time. They all believed the same thing, that Henry Collins was too respected to be challenged, and they had been right. Until now, Claire documented everything. Dates, emails, memories written down before doubt could erode them. She didn't rush. She understood how institutions worked, how easily stories fell apart when they weren't structured. Meanwhile, Henry felt it, Not because anyone confronted him, but because the campus atmosphere shifted. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Administrators delayed responses. Students avoided eye contact. His reputation, once effortless, now felt brittle. That's when he stopped staying after class altogether. Because staying meant exposure. The university received a complaint on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't dramatic. No press, no emergency meetings, just paperwork. Carefully written, supported by corroborating statements, submitted through proper channels. The administration followed protocol quietly. They didn't suspend Henry. They didn't announce anything. They assigned an internal review committee and requested access to records spanning more than a decade. That was the moment Henry Collins understood the rules had changed. He began checking his phone compulsively, avoiding faculty lounges, leaving campus earlier than ever. Sometimes before his final class even began. When an administrator asked to schedule a meeting, Henry postponed it twice. Fear had replaced calculation, and fear makes mistakes. He deleted emails he shouldn't have, reached out to former colleagues he hadn't spoken to in years, tried to reconstruct narratives that no longer held. Meanwhile, investigators noticed something unsettling. Patterns. Repeated mentorships with the same structure, same justifications, same outcomes. Students leaving programs. Quiet exits. No formal complaints, just disappearances. Silence had protected him. Now it was betraying him. Henry's last class didn't end early. It ended abruptly. Halfway through a lecture, a campus security officer appeared at the door. No raised voices, no scene. Just a quiet request for Henry to step outside. The room fell silent. Henry didn't look surprised. He nodded, gathered his things, and left for the last time. Within hours, students noticed his name removed from the faculty directory, its office hours cancelled indefinitely. An email from the administration followed, vague and carefully worded. Professor Collins has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Behind the scenes, more complaints surfaced. Former students who had stayed silent for years now felt safe enough to speak. What they described wasn't identical, but it didn't need to be. The power imbalance was undeniable. Henry Collins had built his career teaching ethics, and he had violated every principle he claimed to uphold. The investigation didn't uncover something sudden. It uncovered something systematic. What the review committee found wasn't a single incident or misunderstanding. It was a pattern that stretched across nearly 12 years. Henry Collins had repeatedly positioned himself as a mentor to students who were academically ambitious but emotionally vulnerable. He identified them carefully, not consciously, perhaps, but consistently. The records showed the same progression every time. It began with praise, then attention, then access. Extended meetings that went beyond academic necessity. Conversations that shifted from coursework to personal struggles. Henry framed himself as the only person who truly understood their potential, their pressure, their fears, and once that emotional dependence was established, boundaries blurred. The committee noted something else. Henry never touched students in ways that could be easily documented. He avoided witnesses, avoided written communication once conversations turned personal. He relied on implication, not instruction. It was calculated. Every student who came forward described the same confusion afterward, not shock, but doubt. A sense that something had gone wrong, without the language to name it. That confusion kept them silent. When Henry was finally interviewed, he was calm. Too calm. He didn't deny the relationships. He reframed them, called them misunderstood mentorships, emphasized consent, mutual respect, academic freedom. He reminded investigators of his spotless record, his tenure, his years of service. He spoke as a man accustomed to being believed, but something had changed. This time, there were overlapping stories, independent corroboration, details that aligned too closely to dismiss. And when confronted with the volume of accounts, Henry did something telling. He stopped talking. His answers grew shorter, more evasive. He deferred responsibility, claimed memory lapses, suggested emotional instability on the part of the students, the same strategy that had worked before. Only now it didn't. The university acted quietly but decisively. Henry Collins was terminated for gross misconduct, his tenure revoked, his name removed from institutional honors, his courses reassigned without mention. No criminal charges were filed. The statute of limitations had passed on most of the complaints, but the consequences were no less severe. Henry attempted to appeal. He lost it. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Academic invitations disappeared. His professional identity collapsed almost overnight. And for the first time in years, Henry Collins had nowhere to hide. Claire watched the news quietly. There was no public vindication, no apology, no confession. But there was something else. Closure. She and the others had spoken, not loudly, not publicly. But truth doesn't need volume to be real. Henry Collins moved out of state shortly after his dismissal. He stopped teaching, stopped publishing, stopped existing in the spaces where authority had once protected him. He became what he had feared most: ordinary and alone. People often imagine abuse as something obvious, but the most damaging forms rarely are. They live in pauses, in closed doors, in authority that goes unquestioned. Professor Henry Collins didn't change because he was tired or stressed or distracted. He changed because the past had caught up to him. Ending class early wasn't kindness, it was retreat. And for years it worked because no one asked why, until someone finally did. And when silence broke, it didn't scream, it simply told the truth.